This is Corrupt, and I'm Charlie Cruz. Today, how a Scottish soldier printed a country from scratch, complete with a guidebook, a currency, and a capital city, and then sold it to 200 settlers who sailed to Central America to find nothing but jungle. A ship carrying 200 Scottish settlers drops anchor off the Mosquito Coast of Central America. Carpenters, shoemakers, a schoolteacher, people who made a practical, considered decision to emigrate to an established colony. They crowd the rail looking for the city they paid to live in. There is nothing there but jungle, no cathedral, no bank, no streets. The place is called Poyais, and it does not exist. Never did. Here is how one Scottish soldier sold an entire nation, raised the equivalent of tens of millions in bonds and land certificates, and was gone before the ships came back. Gregor MacGregor is a veteran of the South American independence wars. He fought under Bolivar. He holds a real military commission. He also holds a genuine land grant on the Mosquito Coast, signed by George Frederick Augustus, the Mosquito King, giving MacGregor rights to a stretch of Central American territory. The land is real. Everything MacGregor builds on top of it is not. He arrives in London in the early 1820s, styles himself Cazique of Poyais, and begins promoting a sovereign nation he has invented from a land grant and a clean sheet of paper. The settlers he recruits are working Scots. Tradespeople, the kind of people who research before they commit. MacGregor is ready for them. He has a printed guidebook, bound volume, circulating in Edinburgh and London, written under the name Thomas Strangeways, reportedly a Scottish officer who visited Poyais and settled there. The book describes the capital, St. Joseph, in functional detail, its cathedral, its bank, its commercial streets. Whether Strangeways was a real man, a pseudonym MacGregor used, or a name he commissioned someone else to write under, has never been definitively established. What is established is that the book existed. People held it in their hands, read it, and made decisions based on it. MacGregor also issues Poyaisian currency, printed banknotes, denominated in Poyaisian dollars. He issues land certificates with specific acreage. He issues officer commissions in the Poyaisian army. These are physical objects. You could fold a Poyaisian banknote into your coat pocket and carry it across London. The forgery is not verbal. It operates through material culture. You have been told something is real, and then you are handed an object that confirms it, and the object is the due diligence available to you. This is the precise signal that most accounts of Poyais miss. The coverage tends to focus on MacGregor's personal magnetism, his military bearing, his gift for presentation, and treats the whole scheme as a confidence trick built on charm. That is not wrong, but it undersells the mechanism. MacGregor built a document ecosystem, a guidebook, a currency, land certificates, government titles. In an era before financial regulators, before standardized prospectus requirements, before any formal mechanism for verifying a sovereign bond issuer, the documents were the verification. If the documents looked right, the investment was right. MacGregor did not need to charm every investor personally. He needed the paperwork to hold up in a London counting house, and it did. You've seen this one before. Stay with me. The bond market context matters. The early 1820s in London sees a speculative bubble in Latin American sovereign debt. Spanish colonial authority has collapsed across much of Central and South America. New republics are issuing bonds. Investors are hungry for the next one. Poyais does not stand out. It does not look conspicuous against the legitimate offerings already trading. MacGregor does not have to invent a category. He inserts a fabricated entry into a market already running hot on exactly this kind of paper. The Poyais bond issuance raises approximately £200,000 in London. That figure varies across sources and should be treated as directional rather than exact, but even at the low end, it represents tens of millions in contemporary purchasing power. The working class settlers also function as a legitimating signal, though not intentionally. Investors look at who else is buying in. They see carpenters, shoemakers, a schoolteacher, people who had no money to waste and who had clearly done their homework. If ordinary working people have booked passage on the Honduras packet and the Kennesley Castle, the reasoning goes, the colony must be real. The settlers vouch for the investment without knowing they are doing it, and the investment vouches for the settlers in return. Everyone is relying on everyone else's apparent confidence in the same fabricated thing. It is an elegant, closed loop. The scheme breaks the way it had to break. Not through an audit, not through a regulatory investigation or an informant. The settlers arrived and reported back. When survivors of the two ships returned to Britain, their accounts became public immediately. They had sailed to a functioning colony and found malarial jungle with no infrastructure. A significant number of settlers died of disease and exposure before a passing vessel found them and brought them home. The exact death toll is not reliably established across sources, but accounts consistently describe serious mortality. The survivors were not ambiguous in what they said. They had gone to a city that did not exist. The fraud collapsed under the weight of 200 first-hand witnesses. By the time this was broadly known in Britain, MacGregor had already left. He relocated to France and ran a near-identical version of the scheme in Paris. Poyaisian bonds, Poyaisian land certificates, the same document ecosystem, the same sovereign nation that existed nowhere but in print. French authorities, by then aware of what had happened in Britain, moved to arrest him. MacGregor stood trial in France. By most accounts, he was acquitted, though the trial record is thin in available sources, and the acquittal should be treated as directionally accurate rather than confirmed. The precise grounds are not documented. No British prosecution ever reached MacGregor. He eventually returned to Venezuela, the country where he had fought as a soldier in the independence wars. Venezuela granted him citizenship and reinstated his military pension. He died there as an old man, recognized locally as a general and a war hero. The Mosquito Coast settlers had no equivalent ending. There is one thing about the Poyais scheme that does not get enough attention. MacGregor's document ecosystem worked because it did not ask investors to trust him. It asked them to trust the paper. The paper was well made, plausible, and consistent. That is a harder thing to dismiss than a man's word, and it is why two ships full of sensible working people sailed to a jungle. They were not trusting a stranger. They were trusting a bound volume, a printed currency, and a land certificate with their acreage written on it in ink. The con was made of objects, and objects feel like facts. You have been listening to Corrupt with Charlie Cruz. Catch you next time.
Grep News. Thomas.